Sports-related injuries are especially prevalent in high school athletes. At Sunset High School alone, hundreds of students participate in sports. In a survey conducted by the National Athletic Trainers Association, it shows that 90% of students report some sort of sports-related injury. We believe that current training programs in high schools contribute to high school rate of injuries in athletes because they do not take sufficient preventative measures.
There are 3 types of preventable sports injuries often sustained in high school athletics: overuse, misuse, and disuse. According to Brian Tovin's article from the North American Journal of Sports Physical Therapy, overuse injuries are caused by performing a task with a frequency that does not allow tissues to recover. Misuse injuries are caused by improper form or equipment, which may put abnormal stress on the tissue structures. And disuse injuries are caused when an athlete takes a period of time off without training, resulting in atrophy or altered neuromuscular control. We interviewed 3 Sunset athletes who exhibit each of these 3 injury types.
Meet Rachel. During the high school swim season, she trained more than usual, up to 15 hours a week, and this intensity was too much for her body to handle. By the end of the season, she suffered from chronic pain and had to stop swimming. Do you ever rest?
Not really, because we kind of have practice every day and there's not really time. And I feel like with swimming, it's the kind of sport where you have to practice like every single day and you have to practice really hard, so.
Rachel said that with sports like swimming, we have to train hard every day, and unfortunately this is a common thought amongst high school athletes, but this is simply not the case, and too often athletes are often overworking themselves. In fact, there was a statistic found by the Advanced Solutions International Incorporated, which said that overuse injuries are responsible for nearly half of all sports injuries to middle and high school students. As found by Tovin, each motion puts a certain amount of stress on the body, and when done in succession, this stress accumulates and creates lasting trauma. So while these motions still need to be done to practice the sport, they must be done in moderation with adequate rest and recovery in order to avoid damage. This is why we need to break the stigma that athletes need to train hard every day.
Meet Jordan. She is part of the varsity track team. She practiced 13 hours a week and competed in the 4x1, 100, and 200 meters. About what % of that time do you focus on technique?
So at the beginning of each practice, we do a warm-up, and the warm-up includes technique and sprint drills. However, not many people take it seriously, which can cause problems when you're racing because they're not doing the proper form and they develop bad habits.
High school sports are organized by season. This means athletes only have about 3 weeks until their first competitions and only 4 months in their whole season. This leaves little time to focus on technique and overlooks it, but technique is very important for injury prevention. In addition, like Jordan said, technique is often not emphasized or taken seriously, though it can prevent injuries in the long run. Harris Matthew, a writer at The Guardian, states that correct technique improves efficiency and can significantly reduce injury risk. Emphasizing the importance of technique in practice would encourage athletes to avoid bad habits and employ good ones, therefore reducing the risk of injuries related to bad form.
Meet Riley. She ran cross country and long distance and track throughout high school.
Do you do any training when it's not cross country season?
Yeah, I do some, but not a lot.
Did you sustain any injuries during this cross country season?
Yes, I got shin splints throughout the season.
Just like cross country, every high school sport only lasts 1 season. Seasons are about 4 months long. In our survey of Sunset athletes, results show that 46% of these students don't play their sport year-round. This means these students go into a sport often with little experience and use parts of their bodies that they're not used to using the exertion for. According to the article, Sports Safety, Off-Season Conditioning to Prevent Injuries in Young Athletes by Train for the Game, LI, the jump that many young athletes make from a mostly inactive lifestyle into a hectic sports season results in many of the injuries seen early in the season. The human body is not designed to transition this drastically. Therefore, when the body goes through this quick change, injuries are more likely to occur. Training programs should ease into the sport and encourage off-season training in order to minimize the shock put on the body.
Even though preventative steps can be taken to avoid sports injuries, some argue that certain injuries cannot be prevented due to genetic susceptibility. One specific case is ACL tears. There was a study done by Helen Smith of the McClure Musculoskeletal Research Center that looked at ACL tears in family history. The research conductors found that there was a 30% higher incidence rate of ACL tears in the families with history of ACL tears in comparison to the control group that had no history. This means that families that had a history of ACL tears seem to have a higher injury rate. This study helps support the idea that certain injuries are caused by a genetic factor and shows how it could contribute to increasing an athlete's chance of injury due to its traits passed down from their family.
Courtney played volleyball and ran track for Sunset High School. However, this year she was unable to participate due to her knee injury, which she had to get surgery for. Has anybody else in your family had knee issues before?
Yes, knee issues are pretty common in my family.
What injury did you sustain and how did they happen?
So basically, the injury that I've had is that I have dislocated my knee. The right one's the problem knee, they're both bad though.
But basically, I have bad anatomy, so it's kind of been something gone throughout my whole life.
While genetic factors can make some athletes more susceptible to injury, it doesn't mean that things cannot be done to prevent it. Going back to the previous example, ACL tears can be more prevalent in those that are genetically disposed. But just as the Stanford Lucile Packard Children's Hospital states, with proper technique, year-round training, and strengthening exercises, the risk for ACL tears is reduced significantly. By implementing preventative measures like these, we can lower the risk of injuring all athletes despite their genetic inclinations.
We propose that high school training programs incorporate strength, advocation, variety, education, and rest. The acronym for this is SAVOR.
S stands for strengthening. According to the Southeast orthopedic specialist, muscle imbalances develop when a certain muscle group becomes much stronger than its opposing group. Not only does this cause the weaker muscles to fatigue more quickly, but the intense contractions of the stronger muscles group could lead to damaging the weaker muscles. Muscle imbalance may lead to strained muscles or torn ligaments. This is why high school sports programs need to focus on holistic strength. A stands for advocate. Athletes must be comfortable communicating with their coaches if anything is wrong, which is why coaches need to understand that school and health are more important than a sport. In Jeffrey B. Keir's article, Overtraining Syndrome, A Practical Guide, he explains that excessive stress, illness, and lack of sleep are all common conditions of a student-athlete, making athletes more susceptible to injury while training. Open communication would allow athletes to take care of themselves and enable coaches to look out for their athletes. V is for variation. According to Southeast orthopedic specialists, when practicing for a specific sport, you tend to work the muscles that are most commonly used in that activity. This leaves other muscles vulnerable to weaknesses that can increase your risk of injury. Cross-training is the best way to prevent this type of specific muscle weakness. Doing supplementary exercise can prevent from overuse by reducing frequency.
E is for educate. The best way athletes can prevent misuse injuries is by being aware of proper techniques that would prevent such damage. They also need to be aware of the possible injuries that they could sustain from playing their sport, so that they can watch out for themselves and take the necessary actions to combat them. Coaches are responsible for a certain amount of this education. R is for rest. Chris Schwarzendruber, an educator from Michigan State University, writes that rest and recovery is also an important aspect of an exercise program because it allows the body time to repair and strengthen itself in between workouts. Without proper rest periods, athletes are put at an unnecessary risk which make them more injury prone.